Hi.
We are now recording
Und Facebook Live.
And we are live on Facebook. So, welcome. Hello and good evening. Can you hear me? All right? Yeah.
I can hear you, yes.
Fantastic. So hello and good evening. I'm honored to be hosting the talk tonight about MOSS, a kinetic sound sculpture, together with the artist Marco Barotti and the MOSS expert Christian Anich. Hello, welcome.
Hi, Peter, hi.
Hi.
My name is Petra and I'm the artistic director and managing director of Kunstpavillon and Neue Galerie Innsbruck of the Tyrolean Artists Association. And we work together with the Land Tirol on art in public space. Before I give the floor to Christian and Marco, let me lose some words about art in public space in Tyrol in general. So MOSS, the project we are going to speak about in a second, is one of the 3 projects that are taking place in the course of Art in Public Space Tyrol, which for 2021 functioned under the leitmotif Staying with the Trouble, a title taken from the book of Donna Haraway, which some of you, or probably many of you might know. Donna Haraway, the US-American biologist. When I was writing the open call, I thought that her thoughts in that book were quite on point, as it sketches a mythologically grounded different world in which the boundaries between humans, plants, animals, and minerals become blurred. Especially in our current times, it's all the more important to make the diversity and complexity of our present society visible, forming alliances and entering into simplicity, and especially in the context of Tyrol, I thought it's an interesting approach to work with the biodiversity that is also present here. Besides the project of Marco Barotti, we have 2 other projects. So there were 3 projects chosen by a jury. One is from Karin Ferrari. It's called The New Holy, which took place at Zielpark and is also in a wooden area near Innsbruck. There, this installation is still on until the 10th of October. And from the 1st of October, we will be showing a project that is called The Month of the Macaques, der Monat des Makaken, which is running a whole month, like throughout the whole month of October. And it's a collective of architects and musicians who are currently building a bathing house at the Raboldi Park here in Innsbruck. And so people can join that event through collective bathing evenings and performative events. Yes, and you can find more information in this flyer and as well as on our homepage. So that was the context I wanted to give. Anyways, first things first. Tonight it's all about MOSS. And I'm really happy to finally introduce the 2 of you, Marco Barotti, the artist who realized MOSS here in Innsbruck at the Botanical Garden. At this point, I also want to say, again, thank you to the Botanical Garden here in Innsbruck, because I think it was a great collaboration and a great support they gave us. And introducing Marco Barotti, he's a media artist living in Berlin. His work is motivated by the urge to invent an artistic language in which a fictional post-futuristic era finds expression via kinetic sound interventions in natural or urban environments. These artworks serve as a metaphor for the anthropogenic impact on the planet and the aim to sensitize people to environmental issues. So again, good evening, Marco. And with you is Christian Anich, a local MOSS expert. How we call you a MOSS expert, but you are really also really familiar with the local moss species you have here in the Tyrol. And you studied biology and botany at the University of Innsbruck. And Christian has been working at the Ferdinandium Tyrolean State Museum since 2011. There, he works in the natural science collections in the field of botany. Christian became interested in the Tyrolean moss flora in 2013 when he made first contacts with this group of organisms while participating in a mapping excursion to the Department of Bryology. Bryology is the moss science, the science about moss. So also again to you, good evening, Christian. For this evening, before we go into the work MOSS, a kinetic sound sculpture, we have the pleasure to hear more about Marco's work in general. So Marco will introduce a couple of his kinetic sound sculptures that he has been doing throughout the last couple of years, right, Marco?
Yes, it's my pleasure to do it. Thank you, Petra. And hi, Chris. It's emotional to see the two of you and to be together and to share a moment. And finally, we are at the point that we were looking for. So we are sharing the outcome of the installation, which is now almost 2 months old already, right? It's standing there since 2 months, and it will go on until the end of October, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's it. So I guess you have a lot of questions for me, but before that, I give a short introduction, as you said, to the public about the works that I do. So maybe they get a much broader picture of who I am and what I do, and maybe why I do it. So I am gonna shut down the video because I'm gonna share a screen, and since internet is not so fast over here, we need to contain our resources. So there you go. All right. So yeah, my work merges audio technology, consumer objects, waste, natural materials, and living organisms into kinetic sculptures entirely triggered by sound. These installations deal with environmental issues and play with their resemblance to animals and plants. I use bass frequencies to generate their movement, and I mainly present them as interventions in urban and natural environments. I'm going to show you 3 works today. The first one is Swans, an intervention in nature made with recycled satellite dishes. The artwork reflects on tech waste and the way we consume technology. It raises the question of where does the waste of technology ends up once we are done with it. The next work I want to show you is the woodpeckers. The project opens a discussion with the citizens about electromagnetic pollution. I designed robotic birds inspired by woodpeckers, able to transform in real time electrosmog into drumming patterns. These devices use urban metal objects like street sign, lamps, and traffic lights as their instruments, and they create an urban composition in constant transformation with the invisible data that surrounds us. The last work I want to show you is clams, and it's about water and plastic pollution. An estimated 8 million metric tons of plastics enter our oceans every year. This plastic waste decomposes into microplastic, releasing toxic chemicals into the seawater, severely damaging marine life and ending up in our food chain. Why clams? In nature, these animals are a detector of pollutants, and they serve as tiny filtration systems within our ecosystem. Inspired by the biology and the functionality of this animal in nature, I produce a series of kinetic sound sculptures that look like clams. They are made out of recycled plastic, and they are triggered by the water quality. How does it work? A sensor measuring water quality is placed in a water body of the city where the work is presented. The sensor streams real-time data to a chain of computer applications that translates the data into base frequencies that generate the opening and closing movement of the sculptures, and into a microtonal soundscape that fluctuates with the water quality levels over time. This is the data, how it looks like when it's sent to the clams, and this is their reinterpretation of it. This was it for now. I hope you enjoyed the first part of the presentation. If you have any questions, Petra or Chris, I guess. Petra, we can't hear you. Petra, we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I would say this already gives a first impression about MOSS, because you always seem to work, or you often work with kinetic sound sculptures. And MOSS is also a kinetic sound sculpture, but it's the first time that you are actually working with a living organism.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. So why did you make that step?
Well, I guess to answer like this, a cold blood, I guess it comes from the will to explore further what I developed in the last years, meaning that, you know, following from the woodpeckers, so the data-driven kind of animals, you know, that interact with the data that we use for communicating, and I sonify this data, you know, representing it with an animal that actually in its nature is expecting to communicate with other species, with its own species, with other animals somehow. So following with the clams, you know, interested in the biology and the functionality of the animal in nature, I find out that MOSS does the same thing. So it's actually a bioindicator of air quality, since it's part of the biophyte species. Doesn't have roots, so is able to store everything that comes from the air and the water. I believe that it was time, and it was like a instinct that brought me to finally get to a point, you know, where I could experiment. It's a bad word when we talk about living organisms somehow, but you know, not experiment, but to step into something new, that it's a complete different thing. Then it's not a piece of technology, or it's not a piece of recycled plastic, or it's not, you know, a satellite dish, but it's a living creature somehow. So you need to handle it with care. You need to understand. You need to think twice and 3 times and 10 times before you do anything. So to answer your question briefly, I think it was an instinctive path that somehow my research had to take at one point, and MOSS had to be the one.
But maybe for the audience who are maybe looking or watching us, our talk, and who might not have experienced the sculpture on site, maybe I think you also prepared a little video clip about MOSS, or to give a closer idea about how the sculpture looks like. And I would like to ask you to show that video, and then also to describe a bit the work, because I have a short text here. MOSS is a dome overgrown, like MOSS, a kinetic sound sculpture, is a dome overgrown with moss, and its movement and sound structure forms a composition derived from air quality measurements in various places on our planet. As a matter of fact, MOSS is considered a bioindicator of air pollution, and it's your first collaboration with a living organism that we just talked about. So, but maybe you could now start the video and then tell us more about the different layers that are coming together, also in your previous works already, but look at it again in MOSS.
Okay, let's do the video now. Sorry.
Wow, it's really beautiful seeing it again.
Yeah, very,
great
very
work. And also how it fits into the natural surrounding of the Botanical Garden. I mean, it's really the perfect spot for the work. So maybe can you tell us about how the sound is produced, and what can we see underneath the MOSS sculpture, and how is it moving, and what do we see on the screen?
So let's start with saying the way it works. So It's as you said, it's a kinetic sound sculpture, and it's driven by air quality data. So we designed a software which is actually picking up data from the air quality, which is a free database that collects official and unofficial air quality data worldwide, right? So what the software does is picking a city on a database of 12,000 different locations around the world, and it's basically translating the data into sound and movement. So there is different layers into what is called sonification. So when you translate the data, so what I do also for all the other works, basically, it's called sonification. So you translate the data into sound, right? So there is the first layer, which is the most important, is the movement that transforms the sculpture into a breathing entity, right? Representing the lungs of our planet. So what it does inside there is loudspeakers that translate the data in frequencies between 0 and 20 hertz. So too low to be heard by our human perception, but powerful enough to generate the push and pull movements, right? So the worse the air gets, the faster these frequencies are fluctuating. So the sculpture is breathing faster. It goes on hyperventilation. So and this is what is somehow playing with the human perception, with our perception, with our visual perception. And what I work with in our audible perception is 3 different layers. So the first one is, of course, breathing sound, which is made with a white noise synthesizer. So it's still, everything is, let's say, synthesized. All audio is synthesized. There is no real sound files inside. So the breathing, and then we have a chords session, which is generated by a machine. What we did previously, we gave this data to a machine that designed chords, major, minor. The machine just designed hundreds of chords that I then select and edit myself during my quarantine in Seoul last year. So I went inside what the machine produced of the air quality, what the machine sonified of the air quality data, and I picked 10 different chords for each label of the IQI scale, because this is how the machine is functioning. Is reading the way we measure air quality, which is called the AQI scale US. There is 2 of them. One is the US one and one is the Chinese one. We follow for this installation, we use the IQI scale US, which is the one that tells you if the air quality is good, moderate, unhealthy for sensitive group, unhealthy, very unhealthy, and hazardous. And these 6 categories, they are followed by 6 different colors: green, yellow, orange, red, violet, purple, and so on. So what the software does, it picks one of the chords. When the label comes out, if there is the green label coming out, it picks one of the chords that I selected randomly out of the basket. So out of 10 chords, it picks 1. If the orange comes, it picks another one. So it's basically an infinite combinations of chords that the software creates every time the new label comes out. And the last layer, which is the one that I'm most proud about, I have to say, is the additive synthesis that I created still during my quarantine in Seoul. So what I took every single parameter of this data that comes from the World Air Quality Index. So from PM10, PM2.5, nitrogen oxide. There are about 10 or 12, I don't remember. We can see them in the screen. So what I did, I basically created a frequency for each one of these parameters. And as the wind transport these particles in our system, in the software, the speed of wind is modulating the frequencies generated by each one of the parameters. Is this too complicated?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, how many layers and how complex this all is. Christian, you want to say something about it? I see you already. You have a
No,
question.
it's fine. It's fine. It's just I know about synthesis and music also, and I know how much effort it takes to get this amount of data and parameters and make them sound the way you want to. You know, some of the chords sound pleasing, others sound more like disturbing, and then there's the breathing noise, and it just fits all together so well. So I'm really impressed by how you did it, Marco. You must have spent a lot of time during the pandemic.
Yeah,
really great.
a lot of time during the pandemic and during the quarantine. You know, during the quarantine in Seoul, where I had this little hotel room and a small window, and only 2 hours of sun during the day, and I concentrated, you know, on the outcome of the work. So again, you know, going a little bit back, Petra, I have to say where the idea is coming from, right? Because the idea is coming from the pandemic and you know, the lockdowns. And the outcome, the positive outcome of the pandemic, meaning that while I was very depressed at home, reading only bad news, mainly, you know, like not mainly, but emotionally very much attached to my family in Italy that I couldn't somehow reach physically, you know, and just hearing what was going on there, it was very depressing, like for many other people, for all of us probably. So I started to look at this, at the pandemic from a different point of view. I started to read the positive news about it, and not only about what was happening, the bad side of the coronavirus. So, and it came out that, you know, air pollution was decreased in many different cities and industrial areas due to exactly the lockdown and the shutdown of many industries and people staying at home on smart working. So I decided that it was time to make a work about air quality. And then during the research, it came out that MOSS is the perfect candidate for it. So just, you know, I open a little chapter there and I close it right away to, yeah, to go on and tell you that somehow during my quarantine in Seoul, it worked a little bit the same. So being closed in this small room, I started my meditation in the morning again and workout. So my morning routine was an excellent jump into a new life, and you know, motivating me actually to go forward with the work and to discover what was possible. You know.
Now we all want to know what you have done in Seoul and how long you have been in quarantine.
I was 2 weeks in quarantine.
Wow.
And then I was there for almost 2 months. I was supposed to stay only 2 more weeks, so 1 month all in all. But then, you know, when we came out somehow, oh look, there is a message popping up on my screen that MOSS at the Botanical Garden just went off. So it's a smart installation that turns on in the morning and turns off at night. Anyway, so in Seoul, I went to an art project at the Gwangju Biennale. And I was with an asphalt pilot and the whole dance company. So we made a project at the Gwangju Biennale, and then everything was so beautiful. The lockdown, there was almost no restriction there. I mean, there was some kind of restriction, of course, but not as heavy as in Europe. So I decided to prolong the stay for another week, and then for another week, and then for another week, and then it was like a month more. And it was beautiful because, you know, the spring was coming, and I never saw Seoul in this light. I was the only tourist walking around, you know, getting inspired. And actually, I got inspired for my next project, and maybe we have the time to talk about it later, maybe not. I don't know.
But for now, let's go back to MOSS and to the beginning, where I was also speaking about Donna Haraway.
Yes.
Because she coined also the term like companion species. And she also coined, it's like this famous sentence that is now really present in the art world, make kin, not babies. So I would be interested in which way did you make kin with moss? How did you go on? How did you dive into the species? How did you get familiar with it? What is about your research? And that's probably also where Christian is going to, where you also met Christian on the way, or on the way of making kin with moss.
So let me start with saying that I contacted my friend Andrea. I can't pronounce her second name. I'm sorry, Andrea. I will never be able to do that. So my friend Andrea, she's a performer in New York. I call her the moss psychologist. She doesn't like it. So she's not a moss psychologist. She's a moss saver and rescuer, right? So she goes around New York and tries to save mosses which are out of places. Some she brings them home, some she brings to other places. So she opened up somehow, she opened up the ethical part of moss, and now human and other species can actually interact with each other, and that can actually help each other. And what you're talking about, so building a relationship with the creature and with the living organisms. So she was the first one that somehow invited me to this new way of thinking, right? Because I thought it was important to establish a certain ethical relationship with the creature before going into deep experimentation with it. So she suggested me to read the books of Raum Tirol, and that you have there, Petra. Can you show it to us? I saw that you showed it before. We make a little bit of promotion. There you go. Gathering Moss. You're muted again. We cannot hear you.
But no, sorry, it's Christian and me were both like showing it. So we are already like totally in the moss scene.
So, actually,
go on.
Yeah, so somehow she opened a new universe for me, you know, from the scientific point of view and the human and ethical point of view of how to interact and how to respect this wonderful creature. So step by step, you know, by reading her books, listening to her talks, and having the little thing with me, you know, I started to respect it, and I started to open up, you know, to a new kind of thinking. And somehow this collaboration started. I started to ask questions, you know, to talk a little bit, to be like the two of us in the studio somehow. So there was a coming and going relationship, which is kind of normal also in a composition way of doing it with the work. While I'm in the studio, you know, you build a very familiar relationship with the work, while you compose them with live data, because they never do what they say, what you ask them to do. So it's a constant fight of you know, pushing each other to the edge somehow, you and the work and you, and the composition and you. And with Moss, it became like some kind of more sensitive, because I couldn't just throw a screwdriver at it, you know, when it doesn't do what I say, or like it was more human. It was more you know, creature to creature kind of relationship. So it helped me to understand as well then for the non-living ones of my other works, how to approach from a different point of view somehow. And this is how I built my relationship with moss. And right now, you know, I don't know, I love the smell in the studio, that when I give water to it, I love the smell that comes out. I love to see how the color is changing, how good it feels when I do something for the moss, you know. And it's just a simple thing of respect and feeding and taking care of reciprocity somehow. No, this is what Robin Valkimmer is talking about in her book. So he does a lot for me. So I try to do a lot for the moss as well. And
Christian
anyway.
is Christian is, I don't know, when you were talking about it, I had the feeling that it really touched Christian's heart. Because Christian, also you have a really close relationship with MOSS, right?
Yes,
I mean,
I
I just remember the two of you being in the forest with the two of you harvesting moss. I mean, you did it, I think, for 3 days. I only went with you for an afternoon. And it was a real pleasure seeing you guys talking about moss, like thinking about moss, touching moss, walking through moss, walking on moss. So how did Christian come in? Maybe Christian, you wanna talk about it. How did you come into this project?
Yeah, maybe I first tell how I perceived it, and then Marco can correct me if I said something wrong. For me, yeah, I was sitting in my office at work, and a professor from the Institute of Botany was calling me, asking me, "Hey, there's some people from some artists and some from the arts area, and they have questions about moss. Could I forward their contact to you, and could you take care of it?" And I said, yeah, okay, let's try out. And so we came into contact. And at first I wasn't expecting anything special, or maybe some questions about how you can, I don't know, make some moss graffiti or whatever, because this comes quite often. And then we had our first Zoom talk, and right away I was really impressed because Marco, you did prepare yourself for this project so well. I was really impressed about how much you know and how much you thought about the organism moss and what it is, what it does, how you could use it, and this sensitivity, how you are treating it when we were collecting it, how with respect you were touching it and taking it away from its space. I was really impressed that I got a new perspective on my field of research. When you study biology, you know, it's always this technical approach to biology. Yeah. You see, how do things work? Why is it growing there? But this appreciation for the organism, it was really eye-opening for me. This collaboration was giving me a lot, and it's letting me appreciate much more the species I'm working with in my work every day.
Beautiful to hear that, Chris. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Same. I mean, you remember, Petra, when you put us in touch, I had so many questions, like, because I have been building like the whole, like, how to, or, you know, like I have been building this whole knowledge around it, but I was not really in touch with it. And you made this possible. There was like this technical questions, and you know, like really how to do this, you know, like how, like your knowledge really brought the project to the end. I remember this, I thought about it, like there was questions for months, they were in my head, you know, nobody could answer. And in this one Zoom talk, and what was it, like half an hour? Okay, we do it like this, we do it like this. I get the permission, I ask these people, you had them all for me. Thank you. Thank you very much, really.
I'm happy to be part of it. Yeah.
But then, so what did you do? I mean, I also remember that first Zoom talk. So what did you bring in? Of course, your knowledge about moss, but how did you do it? What was the next step then after Mr. Bagnitz, I think he's called? He was the guy who suggested you to us. So thank you to Mr. Bagnitz for doing that. And also to Severin Sonnevent, who is probably listening, for linking us into the Botanical Garden, because this was like also his idea. But after that first Zoom talk, so what did you suggest? How was it going on from there, Christian?
Yeah, after the first talk, I had a pretty rough idea about what you were planning, Marco. And then I thought, okay, we need a lot of moss. We need moss that can be sustained on the sculpture for this 3 or 4 months. The sculpture is standing in the Botanical Garden. So I had to think about which species could we use and that ecologically survive the transplantation to the sculpture from the natural habitat. And also which species we are allowed to collect, which species are around Innsbruck, very close to Innsbruck in a huge number. So it doesn't make a difference if we take a little bit. So we don't destroy a whole species just by taking, but we took moss that was there in abundance. It's the most common moss we took around Innsbruck. And
how many species did you take then?
I think I thought up about like 10 or 12 species we could use. And then I was sitting on my bike and cycling all around to find a nice place where lots of those species are growing together in a small space. So we don't need to drive a lot around with the car for the collecting. So we don't need, I don't like going long ways with the car for nothing. So one space where we could go and collect everything together. And then I was looking up who owns the land. So actually, I don't believe anybody would care about moss if we just took it, because nobody sees moss. It's just something but nobody realizes how much there is and how pretty it is. So nobody cares. But I wanted, because it's an official project and it's funded by the government of Tyrol, so I wanted to have permission. So I found out who owns the land, and luckily it was the forestry ministry, or how is it called? The state forestry something. And I was calling there, and they were quite easy. After I explained what I'm doing for work and who I am, it was super easy. And we got the permission to go and take what we need. And so we were quite lucky that I found a nice place where we collect all the moss. And yeah. And then I was looking forward with excitement to meeting you in person, Marco and Petra. Yeah, I met up with you once, I think, before, to talk about the more technical stuff, the more the logistics about when Marco will arrive, how will be our plans for the week and for the collecting and setting up.
I mean, I remember we were standing in front of the Kunst Pavilion, and I was just like explaining briefly about the project of Marco, and you were like really going in depth with all your moss knowledge. So I was really impressed from the first minute also. I've never met a moss expert. An expert on moss. I mean, but then also like when going, because we were just speaking also about, you had like 10 or 12 species that you were interested in that you could harvest. And then when I went to the forest with you guys that afternoon, it was really beautiful how you also described the different moss species and their names. So maybe I think you prepared some pictures also about the different moss species that we can find now on the sculptures. So maybe we can look at them and also like tell us the beautiful names they have. And yeah, I think that would also be an interesting thing to do. Now, Marco, is that fine for you?
Sure, go ahead, please. It's
because I think Christian.
Yeah, tell me.
Christian, I think the pictures you took are also directly taken from the moss sculpture, right?
Exactly, they are. Only some are not from the sculpture, but I will explain with the pictures maybe.
And you took them and you just took them today, right?
Yes, because I wanted to have a little better camera setup here so I can show moss under the macro lens and really explain. And if you see the tiny details, it's becoming really pretty. Moss is, okay, it's just some green thing growing on trees or rocks. But if you look very closely, it's getting super pretty, and you can appreciate this, the beauty in this tiny scale, But I will show you some pictures.
Let's have a look.
Okay. So can you see the picture now?
Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so what we see here, it's just a random picture I was taking on one of my hikes in nature, just to show that you see there's an old tree log and there's lots of moss growing on it. It's at least maybe 5 or 7 different species you could recognize just by looking at it with your eye. And if you look more closely, maybe 10 or 15 more, I'm pretty sure. Okay, but now on to the species of moss on the sculpture. First, we have one with a very funny name. It's the big shaggy moss. In German, it's called großer Runzelbruder. The scientific names are just there for the completeness of it. It's quite large, it's quite robust, and it grows on spaces that are similar to the sculpture. They are like a little bit raised above the ground. They can stand a little direct sunlight, but not too much shade. So the way the sculpture is arranged in the botanical garden beneath the tree, it gets sun in the morning, in the evening, and sometimes in between. So it fits really well on the sculpture. Then we have the glittering wood moss. That's the only picture I took today that I couldn't take on the sculpture because I don't know, something was with my camera and this picture didn't get good. So I just took one piece of it. Glittering wood moss. The name comes because it has this shine to it when it's in the forest and the sun is shining on it. In German, it's called Etagenmoos. And that's because there's always this etage and there's a little Stiegenhaus, like a staircase, and then there's a next floor, and then there's another staircase, next floor. That's an interesting, funny German name. Then we have the most common species everywhere at all, the cypress-leaved plate moss, Zypressenschlafmoos. It's growing in every forest almost. It's the one that grows on the trees near the ground. It grows from the ground up and a little bit up the tree trunks. Then we have the rough-stalked feather moss, Raues Kurzbüchsenmoos. It's also quite abundant to be found in the forests around Innsbruck, especially on the carbonate rocks. And that was another factor I was thinking about. When we are watering the moss, we use the water from that we have at home or in the garden. So this water has carbonate in it. So the moss needs to be resistant to this type of water. So we took moss that's growing naturally on sites where the rock beneath the moss and in this area is carbonate. Yeah, then we have this ostrich plume feather moss, Straußenfedermoos. That's because if you pick one of the plants, it really looks like the feather of an ostrich. The common tamarisk moss, the name comes from, if you also pick one plant and look at it from the side, maybe on the far left of the screen, you can see it looks like a little tree, like a tamarisk. Then we have the kump moss. The picture is not the best, unfortunately, but even like this, you would be able to recognize it because of this shining, glowing appearance. In the forests, I can recognize the mosses I was showing you now from many meters away, usually. Then we have the crisp Neckar moss, Krausblättriges Flachmoos. And that's, it's quite large. It's usually hanging down from trees or rocks. And this one is easy to recognize because of this tiny, crispy folds it has in the leaves. It's also one of the more common mosses and it's really pretty, like all moss. Then we have a haircap moss. It's those ones that look like a little bit like a fresh shoot of a pine tree or something. Waldhaarmützenmoos. It's because on another piece of the plant that's not here right now, on the top of it, there's a little cap that looks like a cap made of hair. So that's where the name in German comes from, or even the English name, yeah. Polytrichum formosum. And then that was all the moss I wanted to show that are on the sculpture that we used. Of course, there are some tiny samples of other moss mixed in between because no species is usually growing only alone in a certain place. That's always intermixed. You see here, there's lots of different types of moss just mixed. And also moss is connecting with other species. That's a lichen, a lichen, and a Flechte. And they're often sharing the space where they're living because they also like the same type of habitat. They like it, those type of lichens at least, like it this little moist areas in the forest, not too much light, not too much shade, just in between, everything like moderately, sunlight, moderate moisture. And that's just it's another type of moss, just to be complete, because the others were all belong to one big group of moss. And that's another thing. It's not a sculpture because it's tiny and it looks a little bit alien, but that's just another living type of moss. Moss is 2 or 3 larger groups that should be separated, but we combine them all under the name moss. This is also really cool looking, huh?
Christian, as I said before, that moss is considered a bioindicator of air pollution. So how could you measure that?
Yes, okay. let's find one. Let's just pick a random moss, and let's take this one. Moss is a tiny plant, and moss doesn't feed from the soil. It has no roots. So where does it get its nutrients from, and where does it get its water from? Moss takes everything from the air surrounding it. So if the rain is falling, raindrops are falling on the moss, and the moss just like a sponge takes it in, soaks it up. And also with dust, it feeds not from the ground, from the soil, like like the other plants do, but the dust stands on the moss, gets absorbed by the moss. And that's really special for moss. But one negative aspect is connected to this. Moss takes everything that lands on it. It just takes everything in. Also pollutants, which are bad for the moss. And that's why it's a good bioindicator for air pollution, because when the air is polluted, some species are really sensitive to the tiniest amounts of I don't know, nitrous oxides or sulfur oxides or something in the air. So because they cannot keep it out, they cannot distinguish which substance they want to take into their cells and which they don't. For moss, they don't have a barrier. Everything that lands on moss is incorporated into the moss, also toxins.
But there were also some projects, like I think Marco, we also talked about the thing in Stuttgart where they made like a wall of moss on a street where there's a lot of traffic, right?
Yeah. They somehow they did that. But I have to say that the Department of Biology of the University of Freiburg did something more advanced, meaning that they cloned a species, which is the sphagnum, which is one of the most common. Chris could explain probably this better. So, but they cloned the sphagnum moss, so they created like a super moss, right? Able to, which is a virgin, which is has no substances within itself. Because it's created in a lab, right? So, and then while drying it at a certain temperature, after drying it at a certain temperature, they expose the moss into various locations in the city. So they call them the moss bags. So they expose the moss in tea bags, and then after 3 weeks, they took the moss back and analyze it, and they were able actually to define certain heavy metal in the air, which are quite hard to identify with the normal technology or like an air quality measurement technology. So this, I think, what they did in Stuttgart, it was more like trying to filter out what's going on. And what they did at the University of Freiburg, it was more trying to use the moss actually as a bioindicator. Talking about Stuttgart, I would like to say something about the sensor community platform. So what
exactly, that would be interesting, because also that would also be one of my next questions, is that you also want to create awareness in the community with that project, and also to integrate the community somehow. So, and that's which leads me to the sensor. How is it called? Sensor project community. So,
and this is, a part of a very inspiring part of the work actually, to find out what the sensor community platform does. It's a project that started in Stuttgart a few years ago with a few people that managed to put together an air quality sensor, which is not expensive at all, and to give it to the community. So they give it to the citizens, and you can put the sensor outside your home. You just need a little bit of power and a Wi-Fi signal, and you are able to control and to measure the air quality in your area, right? Of course, this is not to be compared with, you know, public agencies that have $1 million machines and they take care of our official measurements. It's two different things. This is called citizen and science project, right? So we give the power to the citizens to have a voice in what is the air quality discussion. So to raise awareness about what this is, and to hopefully to somehow create a certain responsibility of my hair is your hair, right? So I take care of my hair, it means I take care of yours, and vice versa. So somehow, you know, this whole project really inspired part of the work. So it inspired it so much that we included the sensor community platform within the software, meaning that the data that we were talking about before coming from the World Air Quality Index is data which is coming from like a large database. What we do with the sensor community, actually, we bring a sensor in the city where the work is presented. In the case of Innsbruck, since we are talking about Innsbruck, we actually have, maybe I can even see the cable coming through the window, I don't know. We have a sensor right outside the Kunst pavilion there in Innsbruck, which is measuring the air quality of the city or of the area, let's put it that way. And this is sending a signal to the sculpture. So every 10 events, so every 10 cities, there is the city of Innsbruck and the sensor community platform sensor data that comes out and shows the air quality of the city. I think it's very important. And to finish, the version that was developed after the experience made in Innsbruck, it's a traveling version, meaning that in every city where it goes, it does what it did in Innsbruck. So it brings a sensor to the community. So it brings a data that the community can use, believe or not believe, but at least, you know, talk about it. And it takes a little bit of MOSS with it. So it takes the data from the biosource and it brings the data from the technology point of view. So if you see, we can share then pictures. If you see photos of the new version, you see a patchwork of different mosses, which are coming now from Innsbruck, are coming from Bologna, are coming from Berlin, are coming from Detmold. And in any place that the work will travel, it will bring a sensor and it will take a bit of moss with it.
Beautiful.
This is
before you showed
the one thing I want to add to what Chris said before about this wonderful experience of going. It's getting darker and darker here.
Yeah, we are losing you.
The wonderful experience that we made in Innsbruck, and this old moss, the old moss that we could take from the forest, is that the concept of the work is that once we are done, once the installation will be taken down, we will bring the moss back where we took it. So at least we will try, you know, to define the spots where the moss was taken, and we will bring the moss back. So giving it back to nature and giving it back to its natural habitat.
It all sounds like a full circle. It makes total sense. But I would like to add something to the sensor community, because I remember when you told me about it the first time, you were also mentioning that the sensors that are like from the US or the Chinese companies, they have like this, they have one sensor in town or something, and from that sensor they measure it. But with that sensor community, you really have like the air quality of your close surrounding. And as you said, you lived in Berlin in Prenzlauer Berg, where there's a lot of heating going on with coal. So you always had like the sensor going on red or something in the morning because people were heating their ovens. So I thought that is also an interesting approach to then in cities as big as Beijing, you really have like the air quality in front of your house that gets measured. And then I also would like to ask, maybe as a last question, You already said it, but maybe to make it more clear for the audience. So MOSS is a process that started in Innsbruck with Public Space Tyrol, and now there are already more other sculptures or other MOSS projects going on currently. Did I understand that right?
Yeah. So it started in Innsbruck, and the dome is actually made, especially, it's a site-specific sculpture. So it's made project, and it's made for the Botanical Garden. And for the next version, I call it the MOSS wall. So it's a stand-in wall of 1.80 meters by 90, where you have access, where you can actually see not only the beauty of the MOSS, but you can see the whole technology behind. So we reveal what is behind the MOSS, and we reveal the merge of the technology and the organism together, triggered by the live data, or driven by the live data, or tickled by the live data, however you want to call it. So, and this is the project that will travel, hopefully, in many other places, that will spread the word about air quality and MOSS. Hopefully in many other countries, continents, during the next few years. So next week it will be in Berlin at the Lost Art Festival, and I don't know, like, probably this is the last show of the year for MOSS, and then we'll take it back next year with more MOSS, I guess.
Lovely. I would like to suggest, as an ending, I would like to ask you if you could show some pictures of the MOSS wall, and then maybe also show the video that you made, the making of MOSS in Innsbruck, because that was not the one that we saw before, where we see also Christian and you being in the forest, and also how the MOSS gets sewed on the dome. Would that be okay? But Christian, first I also want to ask, do you want to add something before?
Not necessarily, no. The more secrets I will reveal tomorrow on my field trip.
Exactly, that's also what we have to say. Tomorrow at 9:30, Christian will do a 3-hour field trip where he speaks about MOSS, and where we go on site into the forest and really look at the MOSS species that is around here in Innsbruck. And we meet at 9:30 at, I forgot.
Hungerburg. At the Hungerburg, where just between the two the cable car stations, just up there, there's a platform up there, an Aussichtsplatform. We're meeting there. One thing I wanted to the MOSS, because for the MOSS bags they're hanging out, it has a huge surface because it's tiny structures and tiny leaves, and the surface is really huge, and that's why so much dust from the air will stick to it, because it has a huge surface. Just to, one more comment to the thing before. Okay, finished, I think. Thanks.
Yeah, so tomorrow there's the field trip with Christian, and the sculpture MOSS, a kinetic sound sculpture, can still be experienced at the Botanical Garden until the 31st of October. And you will probably also come back on the 31st, Marco, so we will be united here again.
Yes.
Thank you for the lovely talk, and now let's look at the pictures and the video. Have a lovely evening.
I first show the photos from the website. I was not prepared for this, so I'm gonna show you the photos from the website, and then I'm gonna show the video. So should we say, are we saying goodbye right now, or?
Yeah, let's just look at the video. I look at the picture of the MOSS wall, and then look at the video, and then. So no, but if there are questions, sorry, I forgot about the questions. I was like, bye-bye.
So I shared the screen again.
So, yeah.
Okay, can you see it?
Yes, perfect.
Great, so this is the new version, it's the MOSS wall. You see the different patchwork. let's see if I can zoom in here. No, I cannot. So you see this little, is it a pine tree? What is that, Chris? The little brown thing here in the middle of the,
It's hard to say from this picture.
Okay, so anyway, this is the moss from Innsbruck, right here, the green one on the right, and then there is the Berlin thing and the Bologna thing. So this is what it's, how it looks in the front, and the screen again, where you can view the data, so you can see the air quality is good, the city is Boston, you can see the map, and you can see the flag, as we spoke before, the AQI, and this is how it looks from the back. So here we reveal the trees. This is the loudspeaker that has 12 arms that push and pull the moss depending on the air quality. And to finish there, yeah, okay, that's it. So this is how the technology looks like behind the sculpture in this version, and inside the sculpture in the version of the dome version of the Innsbruck Botanical Garden. So said this, I'm going to show you the video, the making of video that we spoke about before.
For the sculpture, we're going to use mainly 3 species of moss: the big shaggy moss, the glittering wood moss, and the cypress-leafed plate moss.
All right.
Marco, I think it was like because you were like almost you became darker and darker. It was like, so are there any questions from the people online? You could just raise your hand and then we could let you into the chat, or you can just type your question into the chat. So, if there's no questions, then we see you tomorrow at 9:30 for the field trip.
I wish I was there with you guys and enjoyed. Please send me some photos. I will think of you.
Yes,
Thanks.
we will.
Yeah,
it
we'll
would be so
send.
nice. Yes.
Thank you, Petra. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
See you soon, Marco, and see you tomorrow,
Bye.
Christian. Ciao.
See you soon. Have a good time. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.